You've tuned into the Bellingham Podcast for the week of November 3rd, 2019. This is episode 136. From that city by the Salish Sea, I am AJ Barce.
And happy November, I'm Chris Powell. On this episode, Maya Angelou once said, "We delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty." AJ and I believe that all of us, including you listening right now, are beautiful. And all of us are amazingly unique. How we got to where we are at this time in life is a result of experiences and interactions with other people. Some of these people have affected our chrysalis state, like my butterfly reference, and sent us on a different development path. Join AJ and me as we share those who have and who currently help shape our unique wings. Another butterfly reference. I'm embracing my inner lepidopterologist, if you can't tell by now. This is the Bellingham Podcast.
Remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. How are you doing, Chris?
There once was a man from Nantucket. I'm doing just great.
Well, you were doing this beautiful beat poetry, metamorphosize. I don't have the words like you do.
I just went with it, man. We're talking about inspiration if you haven't heard by now. But before we get to what has inspired us and what currently inspires us, AJ, what the heck is that on your wrist?
as I dial it in.
Please dial it in. We're trying desperately to do that as well.
Sup, Watchfam. I finally, after much hunting, I finally acquired a watch that I've been on the hunt for.
Target acquired.
It's it's from the era of the 70s where micro brands, what we would call a micro brand today, kind of where it was doing its first renaissance. We had a lot of department store brands back in the day, and skin divers were all the rage. And out of that era, we had a company called Legant, which means the glove in French.
Okay.
Legant, who basically made the skin diver. Basically, if you're listening, it's basically imagine like your atypical dive watch from the 70s, kind of a oval shape, not a true circle shaped case, and a bezel that usually clicks. This one doesn't click, and on instead of there being minutes around the bezel, it has cities. This is a Legant QS world timer, so it actually has a bezel that has 12 cities.
Is Ferndale among one of them?
No, but
how about Custer?
No.
Linden?
No.
Birch Bay?
No, but Tel Aviv.
Okay, that works.
No, so it's just a simple passive world timer. So there's no movement in here that actually snaps with every hour. You just manually set it, and you can tell 12 time zones at a glance. I really wish more watches would do this, and I've been wanting one of these for over a year. And finally, I found won it on auction, and it's basically new old stock with a gorgeous blue dial and numerals at 12, 9, and 6. And then it has a Japanese movement pre-Seiko owning them in it, and it's got a date. And it's just, I'm very happy. And it's got an EA8 leather strap on it. Sup, Eric?
All right. It does stand out in a crowd. It is definitely not something that looks like a black square on your wrist.
Thank you.
So good on you for going back to the 70s, where the hair was huge and so were the platform boots.
But it dovetails into what we're talking about, because whenever I look at my wrist and I see these 12 cities, it inspires me to get my wanderlust on and travel, because that is one of the things that I love to look forward to. So, Chris, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about inspiration.
Wow, that was deep.
Why don't you start us off?
So on this episode, Chris and I just want to kind of go through some of the things that, made us who we are today, or shaped a lot of our views that we are today, whether it's in our past or present or future. So actually, I'm going to put you on the spot because you're older than me, so you have to go back further. See what
Age before beauty, right?
Age before beauty,
All
buddy.
Right, you're a young whippersnapper. Here I go. I've as we're talking about doing a show on things and people that inspire us, I did a little bit of a reflection on my life, and there are a couple instances that have formed who I am today. A couple people who have turned me into the gregarious idiot that you have on the microphone in front of you. But back in the Halcyon days of my ute, when life was simple in the mid to late 80s and early 90s in high school era. And the life was a lot, a little less of the knowledgeable type.
Yes, I understand the wonder years.
I was innocent back then, but I had the opportunity the summer leading into the senior year in high school of attending Evergreen Boys State in Washington. Now, what the heck is Evergreen Boys State? So the Evergreen Boys State is sponsored by the American Legion. It's a leadership action program where, I'm reading from this if you couldn't tell, qualified male high school juniors take part in a practical government course designed to develop in the young citizens a working knowledge of the structure of government and to impress upon them the fact that government is just what they make it. It originally was brought around in World War II era, where they wanted young men to be able to get more familiar with civics and government and such. And the teachers of my high school thought that I was a nice young man, go figure, and nominated me to be a representative of Sequim High School going to Evergreen Boys State. I had a great week there, but there was a keynote from, at that time, a fellow by the name of C.G., his nickname was Coke, Roberts. C.G. Roberts was a former director of Evergreen Boys State, and he gave one of the most impressive, inspiring keynote speeches to about 500 senior boys in high school, in which he had a theme that consisted of this: I will do what I say I will do when I say I will do it. I've never forgotten that way back then when I was a youngster and to now. That has formed who I am. I will do what I say I will do when I say I will do it. That was so inspiring to me, and I attempted to be able to live up to that claim.
Wow.
And I've bored the crap out of people at times talking about that, why I do what I do. But anyway, that was some early on inspiration. Along those lines, not as serious, if you will, when I was growing up, I watched about 5 hours of professional wrestling on TV every Saturday afternoon with my grandfather.
I feel you, brother.
Yes. And we watched all kinds of wrestling. If you're part of the wrestling fam, sup, I'm one of your homies. But there were a couple guys down south. They initially started, I believe, up in the Minnesota AWA era, but their wrestling names were Hawk and Animal. And I believe their real names are Mike and Joe, but that's for all the smart.
Hawk and Animal sounds way cooler.
Yeah, exactly. Hawk and Animal were the Road Warriors.
Yeah.
And they were managed by Precious Paul Ellering. And the thing about the Road Warriors, not only were they like huge and buff, they took on everyone. It didn't matter if you were the Russians. Now, back in the 80s, kids, the United States and Russia had a Cold War. And Ivan and his nephew Nikita Koloff and their friend Crusher Khrushchev were part of this trifecta of Russian bad guys. The Road Warriors took them on. They also took on the Midnight Express. They also took on the American Dream, Dustin Rhodes, and Magnum TA as well. And it didn't matter who you were; they were going to kick your butt. and they had face paint, and they would have like mohawk hair, or Hawk actually had a reverse mohawk, which is kind of funny when you think about the name. And I watched them virtually every Saturday in what they called squash matches. And what a squash match is you've got two guys who are wrestlers, part of the crew, that let's just say their skills may not be as high level as the other squashers. And Hawk and Animal, they run into the ring and just start pounding the crap out of these guys. It was usually about a 25 to 30 second match. And I just love those guys. And so that was very inspiring to me, one, to get as buff as the Road Warriors. I had a poster in my room of Hawk and Animal from Pro Wrestling Illustrated. For any of you that were back in the 80s and had the monthly magazine PWI, yeah, you feel me. That was hanging in my room. Some guys had swimsuit models like Heather Locklear and Farrah Fawcett. I had Hawk and Animal in my bedroom. And then finally in the Halcyon days, there was one time when I pulled a Ferris Bueller and I just...
Wait, you backed up a Ferrari out of a garage?
Close. I faked being sick so I could stay home from school. And... I was sitting in my family room while my parents were at work, eating top ramen, drinking orange juice, and watching MTV.
Orange juice or Tang?
Orange juice.
Okay.
I'm not down with the Tang click.
Okay.
I'm down with the Wu-Tang click, but that's a different story. and I was watching MTV back when they played rock videos. And in a certain state of drowsiness, because I took a nap, I woke up and I watched a video by the rock band Poison. And the video was for Nothing But a Good Time. And for those of you that have seen this video, hey kids, you can go onto YouTube, type in Poison, Nothing But a Good Time, and see what I saw. This was back in 1987 or 86, I believe. That's 87, I believe. And I watched the guitarist. His name was Deville. And Deville had this...
Drink.
Yes.
If anybody hasn't caught on to why we were doing that for so long, now you know.
Yes, 80s rock guitarists drink. CeCe DeVille had this wild, huge, shocking white hair that was Aquanet to death. Hairsprayed, teased up everywhere. But the thing in that video was he was throwing around and playing with like 9 different guitars. All of them were flashy. And I'm looking at this video, I'm like, wow, I want to be like that. I want to play guitar. It wasn't Eddie Van Halen. It wasn't Ted Nugent. It wasn't His Royal Highness Steve Vai. It was CeCe freaking DeVille in Poison. And I wanted to be like that. So that evening, as we're at the dinner table, and I was all of a sudden feeling better from faking being sick to stay home from school, I asked my parents, Mom and Dad, I'd like to learn how to play electric guitar.
Yeah.
And I may have talked about this in a previous show, but unbelievable that CeCe DeVille from Poison is one of my inspirational people in my early days of Ute.
Dude, that's cool. Know what else is an inspirational thing from your Ute?
The
fact that we're streaming on KMRE 102.3 FM.
That's right. They are community powered. I remember now. And they're also streaming worldwide on the internets, whether it's mobile browser or desktop web browser at kmre.org. Yes.
That was good. I just slipped that one in.
Nice one. So there's one part of inspiration for me in my college. So I went to college for 5 years.
Yeah.
Don't remember a thing from any of those classes after all this time. It's been about 23 years since I graduated. But there was one thing in a management class. Now, I graduated with a bachelor's in business. In a management class, we had a discussion. It was about ethics. This was Management 482, I believe, on ethics. And the question was this. If you ask yourself, would I do this if it was going to be publicized on the front page of the newspaper? Or kids, nowadays, if you go to the actual homepage of the website, above the fold, would I do this if this would be broadcast or published at the top? That was the benchmark for what I would compare decisions I would make as a professional and as a grown-up. That had inspired me to reflect upon that in many decisions I would make growing up. So, yeah, I've got some things in my grown-up life to go back, but I've talked way too much. AJ, talk about some of the things or people who inspire you.
Well, other than my family that raised me and my family that I am raising, my son.
There you go.
Other than the give me's, I have to. A lot of these are more contemporary folk, but I definitely look to them as like motivation and inspirational, largely because they come from different areas of like how I kind of see myself. So at the top, in the adventure vein, obviously in the Pacific Northwest and being born and bred here, like the Cascades are basically, I feel like, an extension of my backyard.
You are an adventurous mamma jamma.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
And there's a journalist and photographer and adventurer, for lack of better terms, that I've mentioned before in a different role that he serves currently. He's also a podcaster. He's one half of the Grey NATO, and his name is Jason Heaton.
Hi, Jason.
Sup, Jason. Jason's one of those guys where I'd stumble upon his stuff kind of earlier on, and I didn't know like that what he was. And this is before Grey NATO got started and stuff. But if you listen to Jason or you read his stuff, it's just interesting. The guy has a different take when it comes to kit. And that's why I probably kind of glommed onto him early on, because he kind of falls in the same vein as we do, where it's not necessarily about the shiny. It's more about how that tool is going to be used. If it's useful, cool, get it. If it's not useful, forget about it. Him and his wife, Gishani, are a tag team duo that they're part of their own firm. Their firm is called SwimPerf.
SwimPerf, that's a unique name.
Yeah, Swim PRUF.
Okay. Which,
if I remember their story right, I can't remember what the era was, but that was the term that was put on certain watches that were waterproof and ready for being dive ready, because he's an active diver. So is his wife Gishani. But anyway, a lot of the stuff that you see, this is a husband and wife duo that travels the world, adventures. And he's a content creator. He does, the Grey NATO, and he creates, photography and pieces around.
I've seen him on Instagram a lot too.
Yeah, and his Instagram is super, super dope. But more and more when I look at his work, one, I'm like, dude, I totally, like, my wife and I feel like I could be like that someday. All of the photography that you see where he's in it, obviously that's shot by Gishani. She is an amazing photographer.
Cool.
The shots that you see, I mean, both above the deck and below deck, like, goes underwater. Mm-hmm. And, Jason's taken down Gagzooks degree luxury watches that are dive ready and writes honest pieces about them. And it's just killer. When you read about Jason, he also seems super humble. Like, he's not one of these cocky adventurer types where, grunting, me man ugh type of thing. He's just an avid explorer. And he put on his site, quote, "So writing gear reviews and travel and adventure articles justifies as research, a lifetime of tramping around the planet, climbing mountains, scuba diving, and having a basement that looks like your local outdoor shop."
Lucky.
Dude, the dude sounds like our neighbor, right?
Absolutely.
Like, anybody here in the Pacific Northwest can totally relate to that.
Can it be safe to say that an inspiring person is one that is humble or devoid of bravado?
Well,
in some cases.
Yes, but so he also follows that up later on the site. Quote, "The New York Times called me," and I quote, "a test pilot of the world's most illustrious undersea timepieces. And I admit that sounds a little grandiose."
Well.
It just... The guy sounds like the goods, and his wife is an amazing photographer, mm-hmm. and this is her style. So as a photographer, we're kind of reading, because when you look at how she shoots things, it's not your atypical static shots of, oh, look at this beautiful timepiece. To quote their site again, "It's not really about the watch, is it? It's about what you can do with it. And the same goes with every piece of gear, a backpack, a kayak, a camera. So that's how I try to shoot. Put the gear and the people using it into backdrops of their natural surrounding."
There you go.
It just, again, it just kind of sings to me in my own style. And I always look to them as kind of like role models, because they are a husband and wife duo, and someday I want to grow up and be like that.
Someday, if you keep training, saying prayers, and eating your vitamins, brother,
yeah.
You can grow up to be like Jason Heaton.
That was awesome.
Thank you very much. I'll be here all week.
I got links to both Jason and Gishani in the show notes.
For the love of Ric Flair, drink.
Oh, there's a new one.
There you go.
So yeah, that's kind of my first pick. Along those same lines, in the photography vein, I would be remiss not to say that I look to Trey Ratcliff. I've mentioned him before in other shows, but based in New Zealand, he goes where he goes, he shoots what he shoots, and is kind of one of the ombudsman of HDR, high dynamic range photography, and just seems like a super humble guy as well. But I want to predate that. So before I kind of glommed on to Trey Ratcliff, there was a photographer that's probably not as well known. He's based out of Italy. His name is Luca Rossini. And anybody who came into mirrorless the same era I did, when the NEX6 and NEX7, which was Sony's smaller frame, not full frame, APS-C cameras. Back in the day when the 5D Mark II was a heavy hitter and Nikon was swinging hard with their Nikkor lenses and the big burly bodies. Here's Sony that comes into the market of this pocket-filled, it was almost like an iPod moment, the 100 songs in your pocket. Imagine having a DSLR that's pocket-sized.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where Sony really came into the market with their E-mount. Well, Luca, I believe, was a brand ambassador or got picked up as a brand ambassador for Sony, got flown out to Alaska with another photographer to shoot with one of their newest cameras, the NEX6, which I would later also pre-order, and showed the flexibility of the kit. Well, after he did that, he did a 365, which, if you're not familiar with that is, it's where you take a photo or a vlog or you make a post 365 days. And he did a 365 plus one on the NEX7 back in 2013. And I remember every day I would look forward to reading his post on his blog, because, this is a guy who does fashion photography, does product photography. And here's this guy who has one kit, just one camera, multiple lenses, and did this blog every day. And some of the shots was just mundane shots. Some of the shots were kind of him doing his work. And it kind of got my juices going back in 2013 of how content is going to be changing. I mean, think about Instagram. Think about all the stuff that we see today. Snapchat was just a dream. Facebook was the social network of choice. I kind of looked at Luca as kind of the ushering in of, Chase Jarvis is always another photographer based out of Seattle, Sup Chase, is always usually attributed to the quote, the best camera that you can ever have is the one that you have on you.
Yes.
And Luca was just putting that into practice in my mind.
Sounds like he was one of the pioneers of your creativity inspiration.
It was early on, because again, he was using mirrorless, and that's where I wanted to go with my photography as well. 2014, he did a second one, another 365 using the Sony RX1, which is a full frame pocket filled camera with a fixed lens, very nice Zeiss 35 millimeter lens. And he did it again, and he also started his family around that time. So again, you could see how his tone in his shots also changed a little bit. And it's just great. I look at those two, and I put links to his both those blogs in the show notes because they're a little bit harder to find on his site because he's doing mostly commercial work, it looks like. But it's just interesting watching and rereading them in prep to the show. I could see a lot of where I kind of pay homage to Luca.
Absolutely.
So. Another guy that I want to throw out is a guy and his dog, actually.
Okay.
I briefly mentioned him on a previous show.
Okay.
His name is Matthias Berling, and his dog is Gunpowder, Sup Gunpowder.
Coolest name for
It's a Frenchie. Dude, this is how I found this dude, actually. I was surfing Instagram this one day. I mentioned this on a previous show, and I saw this really cute Frenchie, and it was a real good composition.
Frenchie, what do you mean?
French Bulldog.
Thank you.
Bulldog. So this Frenchie. And so I was like, oh, this is a really cute dog. Really good shot. Who is it? So I go, the creative spiral that happens.
Go down the rabbit hole.
Dude, this guy's got this great YouTube channel, and this guy just sings a lot in the same vein as I do as well. If you read a quote from his site, quote, "A man with a bulldog who loves photography and old forgotten cameras."
There you go. Old forgotten cameras that are still dusted off and used, right?
Yeah, no, totally.
Oh, love it.
So Matthias is based out of Sweden. On his site, he also says, quote, "I will showcase photos that I have taken in my spare time. The images will be a selection of my favorites, not the best or most professional or technically correct. These are the images that I like. Never mind the reason."
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's just, and he busts out anything from like the latest and greatest, like a Leica Q, I think is the latest one that I saw him, or CL, I think is the latest camera I saw him bust out, to like a GR or whatever. But here's the thing that I think I like about this guy. Okay. I think he's also part of the Watchfam, because I noticed in one of the videos that he did, on this beautiful tape, very minimalist, like EDC shot that he was doing as he was describing going into, why he uses this specific camera. And it's got like a pocket knife, and it's got the camera, it's got his wallet. Then it has a watch. And I had to do a double take because I'm like, I recognize that. I think that's a Longines Heritage chrono. So I started going through his other stuff, and on his Instagram, he has like a Longines reissue that recently came out. And so, Matthias, if you're listening, if you're part of the Watch Fam, give me a shout out because I'd be curious to know. And honestly, you have an invitation to be interviewed on the show.
Absolutely.
This guy sounds like our people, just in a different country.
Very cool.
So kind of the shift from there to also in the Watch Fam. I want to kind of give a shout out to a watchmaker, and I use that word very loosely. His name is Maximilian Busser. And if you don't know that name, you've probably seen, or at least seen on a headline, the watchmaker MB and F, MB and F, which stands for Max Busser and Friends. This guy is a horologist extraordinaire, if you ask me. And it's interesting because when you look at his background, he's classically trained as a microtechnology engineer. He studied at, sorry, my French is not as good as it should be, École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne. He graduated in 91 with it, but with this passion of micro engineering, when you see a horror work from MBNF, and I've mentioned them before when we do a Watch Fam episode, this is the timepieces that are based off of what looks like toys. Like the Aquapod looks like a jellyfish on your wrist. Or he makes some horological automaton-like desk clocks. They're gorgeously built, and they're just decked to the nines in the way they fit and finish. And really, when you look at it, he also is the founder of the Mad Gallery in Switzerland, which is this gallery of horological art. And you just look at this guy. He's just dead passionate on preserving the information that is horology. And as well as making watches and really cool toy-inspired stuff. But anyway, if you're a designer and you ever wanted to get your inner child on, take a look at Maximilian's stuff, whether you're into watches or not, because you look at it and you just imagine like if Jules Verne's technology came to life. That's kind of what his stuff is.
I thought it came to life in the movies that I watch on TV.
Well, there is that too.
Oh, and like Back to the Future, wasn't that Doc Brown's sons in Back to the Future 3, Jules and Verne?
Anyway, I look to him whenever I think about watchmaking, is just because he takes it to a whole other level, and his creativity is amazing.
Sounds good. So I got an idea, AJ.
I got an idea too.
We are approaching a 30-minute mark for this show.
Dun, dun, dun.
I'm sensing a two-parter.
Yeah.
Because we got more inspiration that in our lives that we should be able to share and discuss, because we are, AJ and I collectively are the podcasting dynamic duo that you're currently listening to, but we are actually individuals who have arrived at this place through various channels. I think we should probably wrap this show up and continue next week or the next episode in part 2 of the inspiration podcast, the inspiration information. How are we going to phrase this? We'll think about that later on. In the meantime, why don't we stick a fork in this show?
Okay, that wraps it up for this edition of the Bellingham Podcast. Thank you again so much for listening to us, rating us, reviewing us, wherever you like to get your podcast. Remember, if you are in the Bellingham area, you might be listening to us on terrestrial radio, KMRE 102.3 FM.
Community powered, and they're streaming on the internet. That's what you're listening to us on at kmre.org outside of your podcast player.
Yeah, and on that inspirational note, stay warm, everyone. It's cold in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm AJ Barsay.
And I'm Chris Powell. Thank you once again for joining us on part 1 of this inspirational mini-series on the Bellingham Podcast. Now I got to come up with a hook for this part 2 on this one.
Sorry, man. Sorry.